Hello, everybody. Welcome to this episode of The Climb, episode number 30. Today, we're going to be talking about hiring an agency. And before we get into that, want to just set up the whole reason for this, the purpose. The purpose of the Climb is actually the Digital Mastermind, which is a group. It's a group of digital agency owners that come together to collaborate, and that collaboration, of course, helps people grow, helps them ease through their pains, worries, and problems. So if you're interested in joining, feel free to shoot over an email to john@digitalmastermind.com. Feel free to check out the website if you get a chance. We stay in communication via Slack channel, monthly calls, and a myriad of other things. So if you're a marketer, developer, anywhere in the space, feel free to reach out, and we'd love to have a conversation with you and potentially get you in the group. So today, though, we have some big changes. Some mix-ups have occurred. Dave once again has entered early retirement. He's now retired to Orlando, of all places. I don't know why. I think Costa Rica was a better choice, but it is what it is. So I'm sorry to see my co-host and good friend go. But we have a special guest today. We have Alex Kombos. And Alex Kombos is here, and I'm just going to go ahead and pull him in. We're just going to get into the questions. So, Alex, feel free to say hi. How you doing, man?
Hey, John. I'm good. Thank you for having me.
No. Thanks for being on the show. And forgive me if I make any production mishaps or anything like that. That's typically what Dave did before he entered early retirement. So, just want to go ahead and throw that out there. All right. So, all right, I know you've seen the show, or I'm going to assume you have. And if you haven't, we typically start with our climb, right? So that's what I want to get into today. So this essentially gives our listeners an overview of your climb, your journey, how you got here, right? So feel free to stop me if any of this is inaccurate.
Sure.
You're from New York, graduate of NYU. You've worked for startups and agencies. You're a digital growth executive with deep experience in strategy, marketing, sales, and operations. Your career has spanned it's essentially pioneering platforms back in the old days when it was the Web 1.0 era, until today. And some of those, and these include live streaming, social media, advertising, lead gen, content management systems, and of course, e-commerce, within the public and private companies. And obviously, you have entrepreneurial DNA, and being a 4-time founder with notable exits, you have a tremendous track record. I consider you a friend. I know you've unlocked growth in companies, created profitability and tons of value. You're highly sought after. Now you're currently working with Automatic, company behind, of course, WordPress, WooCommerce, Jetpack, Tumblr, and they got some other really well-known brands in there that I'm not going to mention. And now you're leading Pressable, which is one of Automatic's hosting platforms that targets agencies like ours, agencies in the DMG, and software developers who essentially build WordPress sites, which I don't remember the figures, but it's a ridiculous amount of the internet that they control. So I think that's a good setup for our listeners. Did I miss anything in there? Is there anything that you think we should add?
No, I mean, John, thank you again for having me on the climb. That's a great intro.
We got good researchers. Dave left, it freed up some money. We pulled in some good researchers. So
you're in trouble.
So with that, the reason for our guests, I think this is a very good topic is, all right, so most of our listeners are agencies, right? Of course, we have some marketers in there, and these agencies want to get hired by companies, right? You've been on the agency side, and you've been on the client side, right? So you've hired agencies, which is all right. So you're essentially now working with WordPress. That's a marquee brand, right? Pressable is, of course. So have you been hiring any agencies or in-house teams lately?
Yes, we have, and traditionally I've been hiring both. It really depends on the stage, the timing, and the market fit. For example, It could be a startup with a brand new product, or it could be a public company doing a rebrand and trying to pivot into a new sector. In my experience, you need to have both an in-house team as well as an agency. Today, especially, the initiatives are so specialized, and there isn't an agency that fits all, just like it did back in the early 2000s. So it's good to have both.
Do you see a lot of agencies try to fake it though, that they can do everything across the board, or are there agencies that aren't faking it that do everything well across the board?
There are agencies that cover multiple, initiatives and channels. But today versus 5 years ago versus 5 years before that, these channels have become super specialized. So you have agencies that only specialize in social media, or only in influencer strategies, or specifically in conversions, or conversion optimization. You didn't have that 5 years ago. You didn't have that 10 years ago. There are some bigger agencies that acquire these smaller agencies that specialize in the channels. Mm-hmm. And you can find some of them that do a good job across the board.
So as a company though, do you want to manage like all of those separate ones? Is that an issue?
You mean going after smaller,
Yeah, let's say that you have a conversion optimization, agency, you have your SEO agency, you have your social media, you have like all these like fragments and slivers of agencies, right? Is that, that could be cumbersome and overwhelming to manage, could it not?
Again, it depends on the stage and of the company, and it depends on the team that you have internally.
Okay.
It also depends on the relationship that you have with the agency. Do you have an agency of record that is more your core team, your go-to team, and then you have satellite relationships with smaller ones? I've done both. That's currently what we're doing here at Pressable. But there's cases to be made for both sides.
Got it. All right. And then let's say, you could even speak to both. Like how long do some of these relationships last?
These days, these client agency relationships wear out faster than ever. They last on average 3 years. There's huge pressure from the marketing leadership to deliver on short-term results, right?
Yep.
So marketing is always scrutinized around the clock. CMOs and marketing directors and VP of marketing face more complex multi-platform ecosystem challenges. This makes the agency selection so much more difficult than ever before. And to your point, the question is asked: Do I get an agency that does most of these, or do I just get an agency that is really good at conversion optimization, for example?
So how many, let's say, agencies? Like how many agencies have you hired over the years?
Oh, over the last 23 years, I've hired about 16 agencies of record. And countless satellite, agency offshoots that specialize in specific media, like video marketing, for example, or influencer marketing that I said before, or specifically SEO.
So like tons of agencies. Hey, real quick, move over your left a little bit. It's driving me crazy. So you're like, yeah. There you go. Yeah. You're like, there you go. That's perfect. All right. You're like falling off the.
I didn't know. I didn't know.
I didn't know. I was like trying to like slack you and stuff, but don't worry about it.
I see a wide angle, so I don't know.
Before we did this live, I would tell people, "Don't worry, we'll get it in post." I never really did, but now it's live, so it's not gonna happen. So, all right. So you've hired quite a few agencies. You've hired the one-stop shops, the full service, which in some respects is kind of a dying off breed, the ones that actually can execute on that, right? Because I think a lot of the smaller agencies are like, we're full service. In actuality, they're not, because that's ridiculous to think they would be able to handle all those things. Would be outside of their capacity. So, and then in how have agencies? I want to talk on both sides. So, how have agencies gotten in touch with you? Is that something that they've been able to sell into you, or is that something that you've essentially always just sought out yourself?
That's a good question. So it all depends on timing. Successful agency selection requires a process. At least that's how it's turned out for me at least the last 10 years. There are always some misses, right? You learn from them quickly, though. You really can't afford not to. So today, agencies, when they're looking at a prospective customer or client, they are always looking to see if I'm going to fill their needs, if I'm going to be staying within their budget. How do these guys measure ROI? Can we really portray that to the customer, to the prospect? However, from a client perspective, selecting a new agency is mostly intuitive. I like to acquire in-depth knowledge of the agencies I'm looking to, like the culture, their players, their capabilities.
So when you go into, like, how do you look at their culture? Like, what is it? Is it like going out for beers? Is it, a table tennis match? What does that look like?
So the best way to say it is I like to try to hire a culture, not an agency. Okay. The core values of an agency will tell you what kind of relationship you're likely going to have. I like agencies that are collaborative, innovative, proactive. Many times this stuff really reflects their culture. It tells you a lot about them. Usually the mark of a good agency is often seen in the energy of their culture. So I try to meet them at their offices and hang out a bit, going out for dinners, maybe going after for drinks, in that whole process, not all at once.
God, you just get them hammered and then they just spill the guts, tell you where grandma's hidden the jewelry, huh? Like all right. So I know you're having to do this recently, right? You were on the hunt for an agency or agencies to help you with Pressable, were you not?
Yeah, it was something that we took pretty seriously here because the team is new and the product is new and kind of revamping everything. So that selection needs to be done carefully, because if you don't do it carefully, it might cost you down the road. Mm-hmm.
So so tell me about this. Were people pitching you? Were you just like doing RFPs? What was your process like, and what do you think the best process is?
So the best thing, the most critical decision is really the talent, okay. Right? Yep. Usually agencies that are brave culturally, they're committed to self-expression. They create better. They had more forward-thinking teams. I try to find out what kind of people they hire. Are they ambitious? How well do they know their domain? Right. I do my research, and I also ask to see, let's say, what their turnover rate is. I also like to chat with the potential account people and find out how the agency hired them, how do they promote them, how do they reward them, right? So talent is very, very important. The other thing that's important, and this I'm going into kind of my process, is
can I jump back real quick before you do that? So sure. I want to talk about that. So when you're looking at the talent, you mentioned culture, and I think the talent part is really imperative because those are the people that are working on your account, right? I mean, it's essentially their minds and expertise. So do you like check out their Glassdoor? Is that something else that's in part of your process, or is it just a flat out asking? I want to know like how deep you go, and have you ever caught anybody trying to BS you?
Glassdoor is a good indication, I'd say, just to see people on Glassdoor usually kind of really go and when they have gripe, when there's gripe.
The trash pail. There are roaches in my salad.
Yeah, but it's not always accurate and it doesn't always reflect the culture of the company.
Okay.
But it's definitely kind of a check mark that I always want to kind of check. But it's not the only thing. It's really, so we'd find an agency through a referral, and there's always some type of connection to it, either from a person that works in there, a person who's on their board, a person who's worked with them in the past or for them in the past. So just getting a better, I guess, sense of what the culture is and how they treat their employees as well as their customers comes from all these different sources.
Got it.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. Yeah, and it's just kind of the investigative process. Anytime we work with, because we work with other partners on like tons of projects, I always try to take somebody aside and have that conversation with, whether it's over drinks or something, just to get the the reality of like what's going on. In some cases, though, it's weird. They're like, "Are you hiring?" It's like, wait a second. It's like you're this lifeboat, and you're like, I don't think things are too good over there, which just creates that interesting dynamic. But all right, you were talking into your process of all right, how what you're looking for in an agency, and answering my previous question before I interrupted, which I can't promise I'm not going to interrupt again.
No problem. I even forgot what you asked.
All right, so essentially, what are you looking for in these agencies that you hire? I know you were speaking to the culture and digging through the talent is part of your process. What are some of the other things in your process?
So the next thing is really setting the right expectations, right? That's very important for us to collaborate. I make sure I set forth our needs and our expectations before we even, start a conversation. So first we need to agree as to what kind of agency we want internally, right? That's a big decision. We decide whether we need a firm that excels in paid media, for example, or e-commerce, or lead gen for enterprise SaaS, or lead gen for small regional local SMBs, right? We also need to make sure that our objectives are strategic and fit our culture as well. So then the next thing is really figuring out internally who is going to be kind of part of this committee internally, who's going to make the decision on the short list of companies that we're looking at and the final decision making.
Do you divulge that to the company you're hiring? So for instance, when we're speaking with a company about getting hired, like what is your buying process? Like how do you go about making these buying decisions? Is that something that you tell the agency, like, all right, look, this is how we're going to do this? Or if they don't ask, they're not going to get that knowledge?
Yeah, we always do that from the first call when we're setting the expectations.
Okay.
But it's important to also do it internally, right, before you go to the agency. And most people on the team internally want to participate in the agency selection because it's exciting and it's fun. Now, it's also important how who you select internally for this committee, because you have different levels of experience, you have different perspectives and different expectations. The fewer the people and more senior people make usually for a better selection committee.
How many? Too many?
Not more than 4.
Okay.
Probably 2 to 3 is up to 3 is up to 4 is the max. The ideal is 3.
And then typically what types of roles do you want in that scenario?
Usually sales leadership. Marketing leadership first, and then sales leadership.
Okay.
In addition to myself.
Okay. And then how long does it take typically to make that decision?
It depends. From start to finish, it could take anywhere between a couple of weeks or a month and a half.
Okay.
It usually, I'd say on average it would be around 30 days.
Do you have like one prime decision maker in that group or that hiring team that you have, like that can veto others, or is it like a general consensus?
I think it's the best is always a general consensus, and if we have different opinions within the team, we try to kind of matrix it out and find the pros and cons where the middle is, because again, there's people with different experience and expectations and roles within the company. So if, for example, my CMO feels really good about an agency and I don't feel as good about them, and we try to hash it out and see where the middle is and why. But at the end of the day, if it's going to be his or her responsibilities to deliver those results, I'll give the benefit of the doubt and go with whoever's going to be driving that team, knowing that they're going to have full accountability of the results as well.
Got it. So, all right, let's say, all right, so you got your team, and then now, how many agencies are you guys considering? Like, is it just like, hey, we're going to pick the top 3, and if you get in, like, what does that world look like?
Well, considering a large number doesn't make sense. We do our homework as well as look at referrals, like I said before. Actually, referrals are the best.
Because somebody else has lived through the pain or had some glory with them.
Or they can vouch for them, exactly. Yep. There have been instances where, we came across an agency that looked good on paper. And we asked about them before we engaged a couple of people that we know might have engaged with them, and we've stayed away because they didn't have good results. So referrals go both ways, right?
Yeah.
In many cases, it's also agencies and people we've worked with in the past that have gone to other agencies. So, for example, if Joe at agency A was there like 5 years ago, now he's gone to a new agency. We don't know anything about that agency, but we know Joe. It's also a consideration because we know Joe's experience. We know how he chooses projects. We know how he works. So he must have done a really great job in finding that agency to work for.
So it would be fair to say that you are super selective based on looking at everything rather than just doing like a blanket RFP to some extent. Would that be fair?
Oh yeah, for sure. And it's a combination of things, right? We start with an initial list of about 6 or 7, which is relatively short when we do our initial outreach. And then we trim it down to 5. And then we basically have a super concentrated short list of 2 where we would feel comfortable with either of them. Then it has to do with negotiating the budget and the fit. So that's kind of the fail-safe, right? In order to say I didn't spend the last 45 days having these conversations, I have to start over again if one, let's say your front runner doesn't work out.
Yep. So have you done the RFP process on the hiring side, where you've put out the RFP?
Sometimes we do, but we don't use RFP to collect data. That's bad form.
Okay.
In general, instead we collect knowledge. We use the RFP to find out why agencies are interested in our business. We try to find out if they are truly passionate or just opportunistic. I ask about their successes and their failures and what they've learned from their failures. Actually, that's more revealing about the character and how they handle adversity in general.
The failures question?
Yes, what they've learned from their failures also.
Yeah. It's funny, like just hiring people and then asking like that question, because it sounds like your cliched like interview question, like, tell me about a time that you failed and what did you do, right?
Sometimes it's effective though.
No, I'm not saying it's ineffective. It's like one of those things where it's just it's an uncomfortable question, but I think it shines a lot of light.
Yeah, and you can also see how truthful they are. right? If it's a BS question, if it's a BS answer,
Yeah.
because it's the right answer.
Right.
That also tells a lot about the character. That's what I'm trying to say. It is a cliche, but it's not about the answer. It's also how they answer the answer.
That answer also seems like, though, that you could give an honest one and just go too far. Be like, oh yeah, we really blew it on this account.
Sometimes that happens as well. Yeah. Like, oh my God, how can they even say that?
I know. So I guess that agency, be careful with the way that you frame that answer. Be truthful, but choose your battle.
Also, though, honestly, I also, the flip side of that is also looking into their aspirations, right? Another cliche kind of interview question is, where would you want to be in 5 years or in 2 years or whatever? For agencies, that's very telling, right? Especially when they're smaller agencies, and growth isn't as easy when you're 5 people going to 10 people. It's relatively easy. Going from 10 to 20 isn't as easy though. So asking them where they want to be in a specific time frame and how they're going to get there given the challenges is also very telling about how they look at growth, how they look at customer growth within new customers as well as with existing customers.
So essentially, somebody could, I guess, like, what answer are you looking for there, right? Would somebody say like, hey, we're looking for accounts with 50,000 per month retainers, and you're like, okay, well that's obviously going to cancel us out, or maybe that's too small for us. Is that kind of the answers you're looking for?
I'm not looking for answers specifically because, again, it really depends on the situation.
Yep.
I'm just looking at honestly and just realistic point of views. That's basically it.
Okay. So it sounds like you're super relationship heavy. Like, you create this process for it's got a bunch of checks, but then you're like, okay, all of these 6 meet this criteria, and then we're going to go and look for the touch and feel type of things where, like, all right, are these going to be people we want to speak to on a Saturday if we have to? Are we actually going to pick up the phone? I mean, that sounds like it's essentially it's the relationship side, which you can never discount in this business, or any business for that matter.
Yeah, it's like a marriage because you're betting so much on this relationship to take you to the next level. It's not only the retainers, but it's also the media spend and the investment that you're making there. So you need to make sure that from a culture perspective and from a knowledge perspective, there's enough chemistry and knowledge to make this work on both sides, both the internal team as well as the external team when collaborating. So
you mentioned some like some high level things, but like what about like brand names? Do those matter? Like, so you're going to say like, all right, they've worked with boom 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 boom, because I've heard in this business, which it's a saying I heard early in my career, it's not what you can do. You mentioned aspirational, which I love hearing that. It's not what you can do, it's what you've done. And I remember hearing that, I was like, oh, that's so terrible.
Right.
But at the same time,
do brand names matter? Yes and no, right? Agencies are important as well as the brands that they work with. And when we say do brands matter, we mean brand as an agency as well as brands that they represent, right?
Both.
They provide a sense of the agency's histories and its values. And over the years, I've worked with, big agencies, big names like Ogilvy, Gray, BBDO. I personally like to work with smaller agencies, honestly. They're more agile. They have more concentrated talent. And as a client, I have more share of voice with that top talent.
So what worries you about the bigger agencies? Like, are you like, is it just that you could be too small, or they just they inflate their billing? I mean, can you speak to that at all?
I like working also with, so the positioning here is a little bit sensitive. So it's not that I don't like working with big agencies.
Yeah,
I do. I just prefer smaller ones in the last, I guess, the last 10 years, it has been more selection of smaller agencies because they were the better fit. So large agencies, yes, they do have a little bit more inflated billings, but depending on where you're coming from as a client, that might not be a problem because
Right.
you have peace of mind, right? Yep. Big agencies represent higher caliber talent many times, right? Which kind of justifies a little bit that inflated billing.
Sure.
They also multi-talented in different channels. You can go for them for problem solving on something that might come into play that's unforeseen. You don't have that with smaller agencies. So there's a case to be made on both sides. However, as marketing initiatives become more and more ROI focused, the smaller agencies have the competitive advantage there because, like I said before, they're agile. They're like, just in, Navy SEALs mode.
They're nimble. They can get in there.
They get in there, they provide results, and they come out. So, these people's dedication and passion for our business will really determine how successful it will be. And we've seen that more in smaller agencies because we can also have that intimate relationship with the leadership of the agency, not just the core team.
Right. Yeah. You want to be able to move things in the direction that's going to essentially work out toward the outcome you want.
Right.
If you have the leadership, I mean, chances of that happening are much higher. That's
right.
So let's get into the the proposal side of things, pricing and budget. So so I've gone back and forth with proposals, right? I've done these like super long in-depth ones where we're like, we need to tell a story and we need to have family members in there. I mean, that's a bit of exaggeration, but it got wild, right? Like these 100, slide decks. And then now I'm down to like 2 pages. I'm like, okay, we got to work all that stuff out ahead of time. Where do you fall in that? I mean, does that even matter to you? Like what the proposals look like?
Of course, price matters, especially in today's environment.
Yeah, but no, not so much the price though, right? So I'm getting ahead, like the style and the format of the proposal, right? So
that is probably the most important aspect. Because
is it really? That matters to you? Okay.
Not the length.
Okay.
The quality.
Got
it.
Right.
So it might be 2 pages, like you said.
Okay.
But it might be, 1 hour kind of discussion and presentation.
Yep.
Presentation of those ideas in a way that are convincing to me and to the team that, A, these guys know what they're doing. They've carefully thought of our problem. They didn't just take a template and just added our name and then just really just presented that just like they did the company 2 hours ago or 2 days ago or a year ago.
Yeah.
That has happened actually where they missed a replace and it was another company's name. So that's very telling.
It's funny. I've grabbed the template before. I'll be frank. I made that mistake back in the day, and I was like, all right. So now we have a blank template that we start from for that reason.
Right. And listen, templated. Everyone does it, meaning us too, for everything. It just saves time. It's efficient, and I'm not. The point is not the templated response. It's how much effort there was into trying to solve the problem that we have or cater to the problems and the objectives that we have.
Like deep understanding before.
Yeah. Really putting yourself in our position as an internal team member to kind of try to figure out the best strategy and ask also the right questions. Sometimes they don't ask questions at all. Like, this is a strategy. Right? So that I think that goes above and beyond price and budget.
Right. Yeah.
Right. When we set kind of the expectations, so we don't go into this rabbit hole of like weeks of back and forth, we do have a range in mind when we're setting the expectations. So this way at the end, we're not faced with a proposal from a pricing perspective that is completely out of left field.
So let's back up. When you're doing your expectations at the beginning of this hiring process, do you give the budget, or do you say, let's figure it out together?
I give kind of what our marketing media budget is, like our ad spend would be.
Yeah.
And I usually ask where the agency's retainers fall within the services that we want to cover. Although there is a range because it's a line item in my budget, it's not a guiding light for us when it comes to decision making. For example, if I know I'm going to spend on a marketing agency, let's say $100,000 for the year, and the ranges that I hear from, let's say, a prospective agency are 200 to 400,000, I know it's not a match because I cannot extend my budget that much. So even though culture might be good, we're not going to go into that relationship knowing that this is not going to work from a budget perspective.
So it's a non-starter from the start. You can just disqualify them. That makes sense, right? I mean, you only got so much gas.
Yeah, but at the same time, we really have to be fair when it comes to pricing and budgeting and budgets. Because squeezing the agency's bottom line is completely counterproductive. It downgrades the quality of the talent that's dedicated to our business. It dilutes the service in general. And honestly, I can tell you this has happened to me a few times, and I've learned my lesson.
By squeezing or being squeezed?
Squeezing.
Got it.
The key is to find the balance where the agency's margins are healthy and the leadership feels good, the agency's owners feel good. And then there's also the fit on our budget. I strive to be fair, meaning market prices. And where I need to kind of be efficient, I try to manage improving the operational efficiencies internally. So if I'm going to cut from somewhere to make this work, I'm going to see if I can cut from internally my team to give more to the agency to make it work. At the end, because at the end of the day, hiring an agency, you're doing it because of the quality of the work as well as its specialization. So
where do you get those market numbers from? Sorry to cut you off, but so you said pricing, where do you look to say okay, this is the market rate?
That's a good question. I'm trying to kind of see how the last one happened.
Is it just a culmination of the proposals you get? We're like, all right, well, this guy's coming in at $7. This one's
exactly what happened this last time and the last 2 or 3 times. So if we're looking for only 2 or 3 major things to accomplish, and we're talking to 5 companies in the beginning, they give us the ranges. We know kind of where the middle is, right?
Yep.
That's the most viable way to really have a good read on the temperature.
And then what about contract length? What's the longest contract you'll sign?
Contract length, in my opinion, has pretty much disappeared. And it's not a clause that we put in there. Most agencies go with, listen, this is going to have an investment for us because we're going to put people on and train them on this account. So we need a minimum of 3 or 6 months, and then it's month to month after that. If we don't do a good job, you can fire us.
Okay. All right.
And I haven't seen any kind of longer term relationships in a while.
That's good. Yeah. And I mean, I know some it'll be give us 60 days notice, 3 months, depending on that ramp up. But at the end of the day, especially in these COVID times, I mean, there's a lot of people that are definitely month to month. We do a month to month after a ramp up. But actually we got our first question here from Kels Murphy. So how transparent should they be in house costs? Because you mentioned fair margins, right? So how is that determined? Is that asking the agency what their margins are? Can you say a little bit about that?
No, you can really tell them how many people are going to be dedicated to the account. So if you have, let's say, 8 people dedicated to an account, and you have a very, very low kind of retainer, monthly retainer, it doesn't take a math genius to see where their margins are, and vice versa. I think that's the best way to determine that.
Have you ever caught somebody like just, cutting off their nose to spite their face? Like, look, you're not going to make money here. Like, how are you making money? You ever run into that situation where it's just, this doesn't even make sense?
Have I? Not really. There's never been an agency that was below my expectations in terms of a retainer.
All right, fair answer. I'll give you that. Now, all right. So let's say that in this hiring process, have you what are some of those red flags when somebody gets all the way to the end in that proposal where you're like, nah, this is, your bullshit detector goes up? What does that look like?
So beyond price, like I said before, we need to have the right perspective.
Yep.
And then we look at the budget. The agency's history is one thing, but I strive to hire because of its future and its vision. I try to look at what they think about the most important consumer trends and technologies, for example.
Okay.
Are they staying focused on one thing and just going deep, or are they trying to adapt and expand? So, for example, a red flag would be, we don't really do that, but we have a freelancer and we occasionally work with them, right?
Got it. Yeah.
The red flag isn't the outsourcing part, right? That's completely acceptable and everyone does it.
Yep.
It's how they acknowledge and they adapt to trends that are on the verge of becoming standards, right? Okay. You are missing the point here. You're not looking at a trend, a technology that is becoming a standard, and you're completely ignoring it. That means that you're probably ignoring other things. That's a red flag.
Got it. Now, what about, let's say, agency, like their own branding, their websites? How big of a play is that into? Like, ooh, that website is cringeworthy. Like, I don't want nothing to do with that.
I have hired agencies. I engaged with agencies that have horrible websites. It's like going to a dentist with horrible teeth, right?
Yeah, or bad breath. Yeah, it's like,
well, teeth is the most important thing because they're there to fix your teeth, right?
Yeah, great point. Fair point.
But sometimes talent comes in various forms, right? They're so good and they're so busy that they don't have time, and it's a cliche answer, but in the cases that I have been involved in them, it's actually really true. And those are the smaller companies more than anything. You don't see any of the bigger ones that have the resources to do it. But it definitely does not make a good impression when you're trying to get new customers that don't have any referral. You're like, oh my God, I'm never going to these guys ever.
Right, yeah. Right?
So, being polished in the way that you want to be perceived is a reflection usually of what you should expect for the work that you're going to be getting.
Sure. I mean, yeah, you walk into a messy lobby, chances are they're an organized company. But I've seen like over polish, right? And it's kind of what I was alluding to, like my lack of experience was creating that 100-page proposal because I was trying to make up for something, or websites that are just trying to like be all these things. So I mean, do you run into that where it's just like, all right, there's an insecurity there that they're hiding, or is this just something I've invented with my own experience?
Can you repeat the question in a different way?
That's it. That's the only way you're going to get it. Yeah. So I guess what I'm saying is, and this is kind of in the hiring process, because I think the most important thing is to instill trust, right? Trust that we understand what it is that you want to accomplish. And then the trust on the other side is that, we are able to deliver on that outcome, right? So those are the most important things. But
Yeah.
there are
So
companies, you understand where I'm coming from now?
Yeah, I understand. So being overprepared, or I don't know. I don't know how to. That's perceived. It really depends on the situation, right?
Mm-hmm.
Being that having that, really, 100-page proposal, that thinking of everything and all that. It's good. It's good to have. Is it? Does everyone go through it page by page? Not really.
Right.
But you do get a sense of the company's dedication, as well as how they've seen every little crease, right, in the strategy. But it doesn't mean that it's the right one.
Mm-hmm.
It could also be templated,
Mm-hmm.
or it could be extremely generalized, which is
I've seen that, like these, exactly, these educational proposals. Like, what is this? And you're just like, are you kidding me? Like, I hope you didn't write this for this time. Like, or is this your template? Right. Yeah.
So, it really comes back to the other topic that we covered, which is, is there a sense of having the right mindset and the right culture fit? And if these guys really took the time to look at our problems, look at our objectives, and articulately be able to articulate it in the right format. Sometimes it's short format, sometimes it's long format, as long as it's correct.
Got it. All right. So let's say that now you've hired an agency. I obviously at some point you've had to let go of an agency. You fired them, right? Like, what did that look like?
I have, and it's not good for anyone. I'll tell you that. It's a costly process.
Yeah.
For the client, it's super costly, and I try to avoid it at all costs. So the first thing you have to ask yourself is why. Relationships fail when client expectations are not met, and the dissatisfaction is ignored. Mm-hmm. That's mostly the situation. However, it's rarely beneficial or healthy to abandon a relationship with an agency without trying first to repair it. So there's several ways on doing this. First is really doing an audit, right? Sort out all the hiccups. Doesn't really take a lot of time to kind of do this. Now, the other thing is restoring effective communication. That's always the preferred way as well. Other times, it's just getting a new team, sticking with the same agency, new team. And actually, that's been the most successful than all of the other times, because leadership knows it needs to bring their A game. And it also allows us internally as a team, with an internal team looking at a new team now on the other side, what we might missed on our side, right? What did we not do correctly? What wasn't provided? How was that communicated? So bottom line, avoid it at all costs, and try to repair it. There are cases where you just have to kind of cut it and have a backup plan.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully the backup plan works out, because backup plans can usually be a little bit dirty. But you mentioned swapping out the team, working with smaller agencies. Like, how big are some of the smaller agencies, when you're referring to that you're working with? Because there might be, some of our listeners that are, like 2 and 3 person shops, and small agency could be, 30 and 40 person shop.
I can give you an example of who I'm working with right now, or how big their team is.
Yep.
So typically, now I'll just do one step back. typically the last 10 years, all the agencies were smaller, were the small side between 10 and 30,
Okay.
30 people, right?
All right. Yeah.
Today with Pressable, it's a new team internally here,
Yep.
as well as it's a new agency relationship. So we hired a very young, small agency. They're about 2 or 3 people,
Wow.
which we saw great potential.
Yep.
What they lack in client experience, they make up in intelligence and insights when it comes to conversions.
Okay.
They're like attack dogs when it comes to executing the strategy.
Yeah.
And even if they don't get it right the first time, they will. I know they will not rest until they get it right.
Yeah.
That means so much for us right now.
Yeah.
It's a bet that we took, and the first results are very encouraging. But we're also staffing internally with good talent that can own the strategy, and they can guide the execution with this smaller team. And we've also diversified. So we're pursuing a separate agency for influencer marketing, right?
Yeah.
And then there's another one for SEO. The key in all this is to hire an experienced leader internally for the marketing team to be able to delegate the responsibilities and ensure that the KPIs are met, because there's so many internal and external kind of teams and influences.
So what does your internal team structure look like?
Right now we have a UX and UX person, as well as a developer. It's kind of a hybrid role, UX and developer. WordPress, of course. We have a digital marketing specialist that does a lot of the social media, landing pages, and creatives. He comes from the design side, but he can also execute on the strategy. We have a marketing operations lead that is heavy into the content as well as the email marketing. And then we have a marketing director that basically oversees all that and is hands-on, especially with our partner marketing and our affiliate marketing as well.
Got it. Just got another question, jumping back to the firing part. I guess that was juicy from Brandon. When you fired an agency, have you ever had issues getting resources from them? And if so, what did you learn about controlling those resources?
After the getting resources,
let's say you fired an agency, you have to get files or logins or whatever that is. Have you run into that situation before, and how did you handle it?
I've never had a situation ever where we had any disputes when it came to severing the relationship. Yep. When it came to assets or spreadsheets or anything like that. It's always been mutual understanding, and we set the right timelines, and we kind of went our separate paths with owning with whatever we need to own.
Got it. All right, right on. All right, so I want to shift gears for a second. This is the question I love to ask. Where do you think other agencies are missing out when it comes to their marketing today?
You mean the marketing that they are doing to promote themselves?
Exactly. Yeah.
I never thought of that question. So I actually do ask that question a lot. So in the process, kind of when we're going into looking at the agencies a little bit deeper, the other question I ask is, how do you get new clients? The good and successful agencies usually don't market themselves. They come from referrals, and their growth is organic.
Really?
That is telling of the quality that they do.
Yeah.
Yes. So you don't see Google ads or retargeting of a specific agency in your feeds
Yeah.
after you've kind of went onto their website. That doesn't mean that that's a good policy to have,
Right.
because
Yeah. It's not aggressive enough for me. I like, yeah.
smaller agencies, and you can't achieve that unless you have a good number of years under your belt,
Right.
right? Have that clientele. But the best form is actually networking, I think, in my opinion.
Yeah.
The retargeting and all the kind of any paid or social initiatives are good as a layer after the initial networking has been done. So my answer is just do an
Meet
extreme
more
number.
people. Yeah. Meet more people. Be a good person. Connect people. Huh? I like
Yes,
that.
it's key.
All right. So, is there anything that I didn't cover today that the world should know? This is your space. You can plug or promote anything that you want.
No. Well, I don't want to plug anything about Pressable, but I just want to also stress I want to really stress on how, yes, we do hire an agency, and I've hired agencies in the past. But what's important to note here is that at Pressable, we deal with the flip side of that, right? Customer agencies are our customers as well.
Mm-hmm.
And I think having this experience is also an advantage for us, because we know what agencies have to go through to get new customers. We know kind of where their margins are and what's important to them. So, with Pressable, we try to really cater to their needs when it comes to extending their revenues opportunity, as well as cutting their costs. So that has made us a lot more mindful also of how we interact with agencies. So that's the only thing I wanted to mention here.
Right on. Yeah, I appreciate it. Well, Alex, thank you so much for being on this episode of The Climb, man. It's been a pleasure.
Of course. Thank you for having me. It's been a great conversation. Thank you.
All right, my pleasure. All right, bye everyone.